Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Wonderful to be here with all of you. I'm Jennifer H. Cunningham, Editor-in-Chief of Newsweek, and I'm really excited for our discussion. We have Andres Zadow. Did I get it right?
Yeah, we're going to go with it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Andre Zadow, the president of FirstBuild. And the thrust of our discussion today is how community-based startup innovation happens within a very large company. And so with that, I want to just jump right into things. So let's start with FirstBuild and the story behind FirstBuild. What problem was GE Appliances trying to solve in launching this innovation lab within it?
I think a few problems, and it drew inspiration for some other areas that we might get into, but large companies are built from the ground up to serve the markets they serve, and it really gives you a very narrow, it might be deep, lens on the products you're going to develop, who you think your end consumers are, what your brand means to them. And it's shocking to find a lot of large companies have a new product introduction success rate under 70%. We were probably under 60% at the time. So most of the assumptions, 3-year programs, a lot of investment. And so really, to put it in its simplest, what would we do and how could we cut out all the bureaucracy, keep our technical prowess, make safe quality products, but unencumber ourselves with all the baggage that comes with having large markets to serve? And who better to help you determine what products you should be developing than the end users who might actually be developing solutions on their own in the home because they have unmet needs?
You talk about innovation coming from your neighbor. What does that phrase mean to you, and how does it shape the culture inside FirstBuild?
Well, it's interesting. A little bit of context, and it'll help you understand how much it comes from the neighbor. So we think of ourselves as developing the future of the home, and we do that in a physical space in Louisville, Kentucky. We have an open maker space, and then we have an online co-creation platform. So there's really two distinct different ways. We get a lot of inspiration from our own product developers and people in the community that actually we're a local service. You can use our maker space for free. So we inherently have people coming in who, whether they want to invent something, they're doing an artisan project, there are people who are trying to develop a solution for themselves in their home because there isn't a product that meets their needs. And probably this was best highlighted during the pandemic because we were able to be somewhat open, and there was lots of social content. People were learning, horticulture, growing mushrooms, sourdough is something that rings a bell. So what it means to us is being surrounded by other creative people and learning from them. That might be what they're making, it might be how they make it. But everyone has the ability to help shape future products in the home.
Tell me how FirstBuild is integrated into the broader GE Appliances ecosystem. Are you kind of rebels in the garage or an integrated part of the machine?
We are almost entirely disintegrated.
Oh, wow.
We are rebels in the garage. So like if anyone here has worked at a large company, there's lots of systems and processes and software. The only systems we share are HR, healthcare. We have access to an email box that GE Appliances have, but we run on Gmail. Okay. Like everything is separate. But we share those foundational HR systems, and we share systems around how we document products we're creating. So around IP, really, and safety. Everything else is pretty disintegrated. Most of the team has an engineering background. The one thing that we share outside of what I just described is our engineering development program. And that's a key part of how we kind of indoctrinate some of this free thinking, this zero distance mindset back to GE Appliances, is because every year we'll have a set of co-ops, if you think of them that way, who will come and do a rotation through FirstBuild. And we're not asking them to be an engineer, we're asking them to then think as an end-to-end product developer. We're not giving you a problem to solve, we're asking you to identify problems worth solving. And so that's a key tie-in, and that also ties into why we sit on a college campus. So we bring innovation, we bring new thinking to GE Appliances, sometimes products, and we're a great recruiter of talent for the company.
So, as you know, most corporate research and development occurs behind closed doors. Why did you decide to turn that model inside out and make development public literally from day one?
I think there's a couple of reasons. You know, I talked about the success rate of innovation in the marketplace. And for those who have been around startups before, you know, there's a great analogy. You know, meet a first-time founder, and they'll ask you to share and sign an NDA before they tell you anything. And you meet a second or a third-time founder, they're very, very quick to tell you why their company is interesting and what they're working on is interesting, because they're probably looking at a hard-to-define addressable market. You might not think there's a market there. And it's that same posture that you have to think about when you take innovation and go outside, because it does a couple of things. One, you're going to waste a lot less time and money developing things that never see the light of day, or if they do, they don't meet what your expectations were for that thing. Two, it puts a lot of pressure on us to be nimble, to be fast. And the last thing, and this is, you know, a cultural thing that we've developed, you know, then you've got to be vulnerable with failure, because it can start at the "wouldn't it be cool if" statement. That might be an Instagram post. We could have launched it because it crowdfunded well, and it doesn't scale.
Let's stay with the theme of failure for a moment, because I really believe that failure and learning from failure is so key to success in any industry. You often mention that 93% of your ideas fail, but that you celebrate those failures. How do you manage a team culture where failure is actually seen as progress?
You know, it's interesting. And I see a real intersection between these younger product developers that come in. They're coming in from college. They don't have the experience. But shockingly, one of the great cultural things that we got from people that have been in specifically engineering space, say at GE Appliances, other large corporates for decades, many of them have committed years to developing a thing that didn't launch. Or was considered a commercial failure. And so we've got that DNA in there, and it's that and the always stimulating nature of working on something new. And if you continue to work on something at FirstBuild more than a few months, there's inherently some sort of pull for it. Maybe the content about it is interesting and stimulating, and it has a lot of engagement, and we're starting to get into prototyping. We may be in a research phase already. I mean, when things are the most exciting, the feedback effectively is "take my money." And so that's really, really rewarding. And when you don't get that kind of signal, we've just pretty easily, but again, it's that blend of people that are newer, people that have had the experience of what it's like to work a long time and then fail, that really enforces, you know, rapid feedback so that you can go work on something that might be meaningful because you found out this wasn't, is actually really rewarding for the team.
So it's better to fail up, learn from the failure, and move on than spend months or potentially even years on a product that is that is ultimately destined for failure.
100%. And it allows us to do it in a capital light way. That's why we can have that amount of idea generation. You've sunk a lot of time and sometimes CapEx into things that are these giant monoliths that take years. So it's tremendously valuable. And we have lots of failures where some know-how from that failure went into something else that was successful.
Would you give me an example of a project or a product that didn't work out but taught your team something invaluable?
Yeah, so this is probably around 2017, 2018. We went all the way to crowdfund with a product called Paragon. It was an induction cooktop with a sous vide probe. We developed some software around that for precision cooking. We built a lot of capability there. We actually, that same know-how, we ultimately helped BuzzFeed develop their Tasty One Top, which is where that brand came from. The product crowdfunded, made it into market, and sales didn't just stagnate, they began to decline. I mentioned the opportunity with Tasty where some of that tech went somewhere else, but internally within GE Appliances, the sous vide algorithm, if you call it that we developed, and the probe actually made its way into a major appliance platform. And so up to over 1 million people probably got ovens that had that software and or probe in it. And that's a failed product.
So there is, this is a clear example of there being successful elements of even a failure, of a failed product.
Absolutely. And, we've been focused so far on the product elements. We have, I'll give you one quickly because I alluded to it before. This didn't come externally. We had a product developer. This is kind of, I'll call it late COVID, as if it were a season, and was watching time lapses of cool stuff on Instagram, and one of them was like mushrooms growing. And he bought one of these kits online and had a good success. The other one died. So he came in and just started trying to make some sort of a case to help control the environment for this product. I won't tell the whole story. Ultimately, we sold some. We kind of brought it to market. We made it in Louisville in our microfactory, no tools, but it wasn't viable. We open sourced the platform, so makers who want it could just build it on their own, but we learned a new go-to-market model. And so now when we develop products, we do it in a different way with the community. We've had a number of products where we've actually partnered with influencers who are building content with us. They've purchased the product from us, and when we crowdfunded that, we did it as an ecosystem, so we had the consumable with it. So I would say, I mean, we spent from prototype to we offered one for sale was 4 months. It was the fastest we've done. And it was killed within a year. But it totally transformed how we develop products.
So FirstBuild enjoys tremendous community engagement and almost a grassroots level of community engagement and community contributions. How do you find and engage community contributors? And are they passionate customers, engineers, or hobbyists, or maybe all of the above?
I would say there's a smattering, but they're closest to the hobbyists. I like to think of the largest part of the communities, the community we have and the communities we attract with new products as enthusiasts.
Okay.
And they're passionate about a topic. Increasingly this has been Instagram. It can be some TikTok. We have a famous nugget ice maker we developed, and honestly, so we look and create content to stimulate, but we're looking for conversations in social where they occur. So when we did the ice maker, the most engaged community was a subreddit. It was wild. People, and that was Nugget Ice. Shockingly, you didn't really have options in the home. People were like tucking in their community, which stores will let you go in and buy bagged Nugget Ice. Like, will Sonic give you a 5-pound bag of Nugget Ice? I buy 3 a week, like this, that, and so like when you see conversations like that, we try and interject ourselves in them, and sometimes that's stepping into someone's DMs because we see comments going on, or in their comments, or creating and publishing our own content, usually video.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You're almost crowdsourcing from the internet and from social media.
100%. That's where our inspiration is. I think people think of crowdsourcing in a different context. I like to, the power of the crowd drives what we do. Otherwise, we couldn't. But it is a form of social product development. And there are people out there that have unmet needs or are using existing products in ways other than they were intended that are not ideal for their actual need. And then you just have passionate communities that love something, and you see the engagement in it, and you start asking questions like, well, how do they serve that need? are a huge number of the people engaging with this content really interested in it, but there's some sort of gap from being, I like watching this content, to I am a performer of this thing. Maybe sourdough could be an example.
What motivates the community to contribute ideas and prototypes to a company like GE Appliances generally, and FirstBuild specifically? Do you think it's creativity, a want or a need, ownership, or something else?
I don't think it's as much ownership. I do get that question sometimes, and we really try and foster, if people have ideas online, we're not like the Inventor Submission Bureau.
Yeah.
We're also not asking to take ownership of anything you post online. For the IP attorneys out there, you may be creating prior art, but it's not our stuff. Okay. It's your stuff. And a lot of the people that engage with us don't immediately realize that FirstBuild is at all associated with GE. And that's very, very intentional. And that's not to hide something. We operate very, very differently. We don't want any shackles on us for what category or product we might pursue. So I don't want to worry about if something fits the GE brand, but also if I put it out there, I want you to vote on this idea, not whether or not I trust GE brand or a GE Appliances brand. So most of these people are just enthusiasts. And so why they commit to it is they have an unmet need or an undermet need. Like, these people are our biggest fans. And we've also now built a track record on Indiegogo that we deliver. We have crowdfunded a lot, so I think we give people confidence when they see it's a FirstBuild item. We've delivered great products consistently, so I think that helps. But it's natural enthusiasm is the vast majority. The minority are maybe designers or other people that want to contribute physically to the idea, but they certainly upvote and downvote how it comes to life.
Can you share a memorable story of a community member who submitted an idea, or the gem or the kernel of an idea that shaped a final product?
Yeah, a really good one, and I don't know if it was the initial gem, and so I think of community as online, in person. You have nothing to do with GE Appliances. We have people that work at GE Appliances and then come down to FirstBuild across town and act as a community member. So I'll give you a couple that come from the Opal Nugget Ice Maker. It's probably, or it certainly is, the most famous product that came from FirstBuild. So, and I'll give you two. The inspiration for the idea, and this ties to why do you exist? Some of the first questions you asked. Advanced system engineer that works in the refrigeration division of GE Appliances. Massive business, and has been working on how do I put Nugget Ice in a full-size refrigerator, literally for years. But he can't solve the business problem. There is no way to define the addressable market. There is no clear way through the research to get, or they haven't gotten signal that price elasticity is such that we should put $50 million to tool a new refrigerator. And that's what a new refrigerator is going to cost you, $50 million plus 2 to 3 years. So he came down to FirstBuild and just said, people love Nugget Ice, they're obsessed with it, and they need to have it in their home. That's when we found the subreddit. So that was just the kernel. He wanted to come down and work on Nugget Ice in some other way than what he did at work. Same product, we did a design challenge, and as we were trying to figure out what this looks like, we had sort of settled that it's countertop, it needs to be affordable, but we did a design challenge, and a community member in Mexico submitted the winning design for key elements of the product, and in that design challenge we offered a cash prize for the winning design. So 2-for-1 product of how it might come together.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's stay in the Opal Ice Nugget area for a moment. The Opal has become almost kind of a legend in the crowdfunding world.
I think I have an Opal slide. I threw it up.
Okay. There you go. How did that project start?
Well, I gave you, a little bit of the impetus of it, and again, I talked about, large companies are they're really machines. I think you used the comment earlier, you're just part of the machine, and we're not. And they are optimized to deliver at scale in like the verticals they understand, to the markets and channels they serve, and ship in the ways that they're used to shipping. You know, that was really someone came in and I would say we solved the business problem, but really it started because someone really drew our attention to the fact that there was this tremendous passion around this type of ice that was out there. If you're not familiar with Nugget Ice, some people call it Sonic Ice or Hospital Ice or maybe Chick-fil-A. It's compacted snowflakes. It's a little porous. You can chew it. If you put it in a flavored drink, it kind of keeps some of the flavor of that drink. And people are obsessed with it. But it had not been democratized. And it was a tough space for a big company to look at. They're like, no one else is doing it, which is like key startup territory, right? Like there's an undefined market. Your TAM may be tiny, you know, but we just started asking different questions. You know, we found the Reddit community, we started speaking to them, we started creating content, and it was like, are you obsessed with Nugget Ice? The outpouring was absolutely ridiculous. You know, do you want it in your home? And, you know, shockingly, there was this amazing passion. It's the way you use the product. Like, I've looked in other spaces. There's lots of stuff that happens in restaurants that's not well adopted at home, but it doesn't have the usage or the passion that ice does, like sous vide or something. So we just started asking different questions and triangulating. People were like, I have an ice maker in my fridge. Then we found one of the other problems. The only way you get one at home is they had under-counter ones that had to be plumbed. So you needed a place to put it with plumbing and drainage, and they cost like $3,000. And so I can't get it in a fridge. I don't have a place or the money for that. I need a solution I can afford. I would use it every single day. My family's obsessed. And that moved us down in size and in price point, so we kind of got to this form factor.
What were some of the biggest surprises in how the community shaped the design or direction as you built the ice maker and got it ready for market?
Well, I'll bury the lead a little bit, because the biggest surprise came in the crowdfund. But some of it was the quality of some of the ideas. I mean, the design challenge, we hadn't tried that, right? And as I said, it was clear the vast majority of the community, you know, maybe at the time we thought almost all, were really coming from that point about being passionate about the product's product. They were obsessed with this ice. You know, like this is kind of a zeitgeist product. They're not all going to be like that. But that was such a wide group. There was a tremendous amount of talent in there. You know, just because one person won didn't mean there wasn't a compelling search in the design challenge. That people would offer to pay and ask to buy a prototype. You know, later on we would sell prototypes in later crowdfunds. A little easier, a little more difficult to do it with refrigerant in the system. But that was shocking. And then we had all kinds of people. We had pools going internally. What's the crowdfund going to be? Like, you know, I think our stated goal was $100,000. You know, and then there's the number you publish, and we always kind of get there. There's marketing math behind all this, right? We know how many people have joined our list and expressed interest, and Opal was one of the first. So like now we're really good at it. We could tell by the list like about what the crowdfund's going to be. So I think the biggest bet was 800,000. Maybe we'll do $1 million. We raised $2.7 million on this. Wow. So those were some of the shockers.
How I know that you're looking at communities in various ways, online, in person, and also looking to different platforms. And how did your partnership with platforms like Indiegogo influence how you test and validate ideas?
Well, it's interesting. There's a number of platforms out there, and you know their leadership in terms of service have changed over the time, and we've had a great relationship with Indiegogo, and I think you know some of the other crowdfund platforms out there have evolved since. But they were just tremendously friendly in the structure and what the cost of that program would be and how we would market to those folks, and even had flexibility if we wanted to adjust mid-crowdfund, which has happened a couple times. It's happened off the top of my head, certainly Opal, Sourdough Sidekick, because we had to increase the size of the offering. We were selling out, and we were like, we can support more. And so in terms of how we market, that's definitely an evolution. I don't know if it was part of the initial decision set, but while most of the team is product developers, like always on content creation and really having a strategy behind when we pay to boost that, and like having now years of data, that really, really helps us in terms of we understand the list, we understand the acquisition costs, we understand the organic reach, and so a lot of the secret sauce just comes, whether it's Facebook and Instagram, which I think are some of the top places we would spend today, some Google search. It really helps. At this point, we have confidence in an idea, we're moving, but it really helps us think about maybe the discount to where we think a product might price in the market, how much we're gonna spend on marketing, how big of an event it's going to be. And a lot of that secret sauce happens upstream, either in search or on the social platforms, versus, say, on the crowdfund platform.
So let's talk about your newest product innovation, and you're getting into the sourdough business.
We are. That's been a different one. This is a space we've had some interest in before. I have just two visuals, too, because I'll show you what it looks like now, but what the first idea was. And this is a killed product, and it certainly doesn't look like much. But again, I told you, I feel like we're justifying a social media addiction that most people in this room have because of like how we consume content. But this was all the rage, sourdough, during the pandemic, and you could see the data, and whether it was the reach of the stuff on social, or bread makers are sold out in half the country. And so like our first foray into the space, we tried to understand what people's barriers to sourdough were. Because a lot of people were interested in bread, and we started to realize there was a chasm, like something to cross. And I'm like, that's a place where FirstBuild can fit. And so the idea was like, this was a smart lid, and it was gonna help you understand what was going on in your sourdough starter. And that's the whole thing. Starter is like, kind of like your active, think of it like the yeast, and it's something you feed and maintain, and you got to clean it up and discard it. But you need this. It's the engine to make your sourdough dough. And this was not successful. People weren't interested in it. There was like a very narrow, people engaged a lot because they liked sourdough, but it was a very narrow subset of people who were like, yes, give me more data about my sourdough starter. And so this kind of went to the wayside for a few years. And I told you a few minutes ago, we had a crowdfund a few years ago. The product was Mela, the mushroom starter, where we're like, we should work with the community at large, but like I told you, that was with a consumable. So we got in touch with King Arthur Baking. We started to understand, like, and by the way, sourdough is like having another moment. Like maybe it's not as big on social. Maybe this is more tied to like the health craze than I can't go to the store for sure. But sourdough is doing this. And so King Arthur, if you haven't heard of them, they're real big in the Northeast. They're one of the oldest companies in North America from like 1790. And they were like, actually feeding and maintaining the starter is what we think the issue is. And we're like, okay. So we started creating content on this, and I think I can go back 2 slides. I'll show you. This is, that's the Nugget Ice Challenge. I think I have another one of the finished product in a minute. I'll come back to it. But we started trying to come up with a machine that would feed your starter for you, which is you have to add and dose like daily water and flour to the product. And we came up with a prototype. People online loved it. King Arthur Baking was like, that's not how you maintain sourdough. They're like, you have to, every day, every couple days, discard some. Like there'll be some crusty stuff at the top, like you can't maintain it that way. So we worked back and forth developing software on this thing and creating content publicly. And the lead list was enormous. Everyone's like, if you just maintain my sourdough starter for me, it'll change my life. Other people were like, I would bake it if this existed. And so we even sold a prototype to King Arthur for them to test in their lab. And they're like the OGs of baking. And they're like, we didn't think it would work, and it works. And they gave us feedback to improve the product. And that's from how we manage the software that feeds it to the glass jar that we use with the product is based on their design. That's a best-selling one. So that was kind of the iteration. But again, the original concept we had was a complete and total failure, but we got signal and went back and tried to approach it in a different way when we really understood the pain point to solve.
Mm-hmm. So, Andre, what does smart sourdough really mean? And how does it reflect the future of connected kitchen innovation?
Well, I think a couple things. I think the first thing is, and I wear multiple hats in my life, so I've worked on a lot of connected products over my career. But I think a key insight for people is not everything that's smart has to be connected, though there's a lot of benefits to that I think people underappreciate. But the most important thing that a smart product needs to be is it needs to really solve an actual pain point for you, and it's going to make a job to be done easier or allow you to do a job that you are choosing not to do because it's difficult or you don't have the time. And I think that's ultimately the true promise of smart and connected kitchen. And so that's our lens when we think about a product. We ask community members if they wanted this to truly be connected. Like we've made other products that you can update and improve or add features, but there's trade-offs to that. And this particular product's really elegant in that it's designed for a really specific task, relative to what people are trying to do and other sourdough accessories on the market, super affordable. And people are like, well, what else would I possibly need it to do for me? So hopefully that touches a little on where I think connected versus smart is. And it's also my lens as to whether or not something needs to be connected. And the users help you make that decision.
Was the community involved in this product's development as well? And if so, in what ways?
A ton of things. Overall size, capacity. We developed a lot of the designs in this ones. We didn't do an open challenge. It had some more constraints because and let me see if I can make a little video go on the background. So you could see on the right some of the work we did on Sourdough Sidekick. And this is what the product looks like now. And you're seeing kind of an evolution through 3D printed prototypes. And that's the finished product. So in this, the industrial design, the soft edges, does it need an interface? What feedback do you want on it? How big is big enough? How big is too big? Research on what you would pay for it. I mean, and the thing when you have a community this engaged, people just volunteer. They'll fill out a survey. And we just do a Survey Monkey. We're not going out and doing high dollar concept testing. Some of our content may look like a concept, but you kind of saw that little time lapse of the evolution of different 3D prints, and a lot of those changes in piece of feedback came from the consumer. They really did. What materials do you want was maybe a little bit both King Arthur and the consumer, but the consumer are actually going to steer us towards what they want to buy. And so, scan the QR code if you like.
So for the corporate leaders that are listening to us today, how can large companies apply the FirstBuild model, but without losing control on the one hand, or brand coherence on the other?
Yeah, I've gotten to do some things adjacent to social product development. Nothing quite like FirstBuild, but really over the last 3 companies I've been with in the startup world, once in the B2B space and once here. So I'll try and give you a few thoughts. First of all, I think you really need to think twice about what is the controllable that you're concerned about. I talked about how we think about brand earlier, and this has evolved even through, I've been leading FirstBuild for over 5 years. originally we had this kind of bias of like, let's validate something. G Appliance is like a big company that might have a house of brands. It has, has brands to meet all the consumer segments. And, we caught ourselves, sometimes I think too early on in hindsight, trying to say like, okay, well, where would this fit in the house? Like which brand, which consumer segment? I now think we're unencumbered by that. So that is an option, but it's not a requirement. So again, what are you trying to control? I think doing it arm's length the way we have, where it's wholly owned subsidiary, we're not hiding it from anyone, we're not promoting that we're GE. Again, there's two key foundational reasons for that is, one, we're gonna explore some new categories. We're gonna try some crazy stuff. Like we made an indoor mushroom grower. Like I don't have to, I wanna answer the question of, is there a consumer need? Is this an interesting market? I talked to you, we develop engineers, we develop tech, we develop marketing prowess. All those things are valuable even if the end market wasn't valuable. So, are those questions for your parent company or university? Then something like this could be interesting to you. You can take a lot of these approaches and not go on social media to do it. I think the idea of being unencumbered by a lot of the existing processes and systems and having a lean, nimble team that engages with end users, whether those are consumers or B2B customers, and I've done both, and really understand what they're trying to do in their lives, what they're kind of using string and scotch tape to pull together now, and is that a problem worth solving that you can solve? That's really the lens for this in general. And you don't have to go out on social media to do it, but you also don't need to pay an agency to recruit 10,000 or 2,000 people. You can find ways to engage users, I think, in a more meaningful, intimate, and iterative way, where you can get continuous feedback.
What is the hardest part about convincing corporate executives to embrace things like transparency in innovation?
I mean, it might depend a little bit culture to culture. You asked about control. I said, what do you want to control? I think a lot of corporates think everything. And so that's the biggest, thought, that something may be pursued that is other than what you initially intended or, is outside the current core mission of the company. Now, you could have some thought to define what that is. I mean, I have some thoughts on it for our company. But I think the potential loss of control is something that a lot of large company executives are going to be concerned with. There's us or them mentality that can occur when you're as off the reservation as we are. I think there was a period of time when we had that. I think we've really largely
How did you move
broken
through that?
By really being, we had to go back and market ourselves to the company. Honestly, putting a couple wins on the board helps, but some of the things I've just said in the last 3-4 minutes, like going back and sitting with a core business unit and trying to understand what their pain points are and talk about how some of this thinking, some of these approaches could benefit them. So FirstBuild, like I have a number of products we've showed today. We have developed products for GE Appliances, either a core product line or a brand, in a closed way that didn't end up on social. So I'll give you a quick example because this, I think, will help everyone. So GE Appliances has a bunch of appliance brands. Monogram is their super premium brand. So think like Wolf, Viking, Sub-Zero. That's where they play. And so it's high volume, low price point. And I would say we have a great brand, but we're a growth brand in that space because some of you knew the other ones I mentioned better than Monogram. That's really, really tough when they want to have new offerings because it's very high price point. The volume's not necessarily high enough. So we engaged with designers in the brand, and they have an official design partner. And I told you we have a maker space. So we worked with the brand and their lead designers to design a potential luxury collection. So these are integrated products. I'll make it a quick example, but think of the refrigerators that have an integrated panel, right? So we designed a designer series of panels and a designer hood. We have a brass version. We have ones that look kind of gunmetal. They're very cool. But, and then we got feedback from builders and architects like, do you want this thing? And so we're actually manufacturing those in small batches every single day. And so like when we started doing a few things like that, we're like, hey, we can use our prowess to serve a core business need. You have a business need and you don't have the volume to justify a capital investment. Does your need fit our set of skills? And maybe we can work. So with that is included in some of the products we've developed. We have an air conditioning business that needed to put a UV filter in an air conditioner. And they're like, we want to launch, during COVID, we want to launch it in 90 days. We built a design that we could cut and bend at FirstBuild and then ship over to their plant to help them get to market. And then they went and found a vendor who could tool it and come in. So again, I use those as examples, but like the biggest thing we do is teaching, sitting with them when they do their annual planning. We've hosted hackathons for them and design challenges. Now we're a problem solver for them and not a competitor, but we had to be really intentional and say, like, we've kind of built a playbook. You don't have to run the whole play like we did Sourdough Sidekick. Like there are tools in there that are applicable to myriad business problems.
So, looking ahead, what technologies or cultural shifts are changing the way that you engage with your communities? Is it AI? Is it sustainability? Is it, the concept of maker culture?
You definitely see some concept of maker culture, but I think that's been kind of a thread. I see it. In a way, I almost see it rebounding. Like the heyday of maker culture was like almost like 10 years ago. And I think you've seen it come back a little bit since COVID. It's a place that we really want to be intentional because it gives us a lot of our creative juices. For those who are curious how this all comes together and it's funded, like that maker culture is a core to why we're able to sit on a college campus and pull engineers from them and we're a utility to our community. They'll have the news come in and say, this is a place you should go, and people come build their projects. They bring their kids in to use 3D printers. So like, it's very intentional, and it doesn't just serve the product output. I've always been conscious of the fact that like, when we started, we were a cost center. We're in our 11th year. By year 4, we're in the black. But like, by being a pillar of the community, like, we're not something you want to get rid of anymore. But we had to prove ourselves. But like as far as emerging trends, like AI is going to play more of a role. Maybe not as much in some of the ways people might think. There was a great talk I missed yesterday from someone we had dinner with who was talking about intellectual property and IP. So I wish you could rely on on AI to do even more product design and product development. But oh my gosh, is it helping us iterate more internally? And we're really at the point where like I can have marketers who don't know CAD start coming up with designs and 3D printing and artifact the same day. And so like it's bringing different people on the business side into some of the design process that had usually been purely engineering and design. That's super exciting. Sustainability, I think, is a big one. It's still smaller than I care admit in the US. Like a lot of when we do things on social and we get a ton of feedback around sustainability and power consumption, it tends to be more of our international users still today, which is something that I notice. But just to touch on a few that you mentioned, I'm really curious in how some of how we engage in social, continues to evolve. Like we're not using AI we put up stuff that is very, hopefully discernibly real online. You understand that we're building it. And I think it might end up being a point of difference for us with all the noise out there, but we'll see. AI is getting good.
So the human to human connection in this space will remain, regardless of the new technology.
I think so. I think a huge part of the trust we build, because every time certainly when we get towards crowdfunding, every day we engage new users, but like as something goes from prototype to like this might really happen, like we're really attracting a high percentage of new people to the community because they're specifically engaged in this area. Whether, sourdough folks didn't have, the Venn diagram was not a circle between them and the ice folks, I promise you. A lot of incremental folks. But like our product developers, are on camera. They begin to know them. They want to see updates from them. They feel that passion for the idea. I think it is part of why we get such engagement, because they see someone on screen that they identify with. And that person on screen is an expert in engineering, but they're looking at the audience, knowing the audience knows more about this than them. We know how to make appliances. And so there's this kind of, again, it's through the screen, but it's an exchange of respect. I think it's a huge reason we get the organic engagement we do. I think it's important. And clearly, like, we've had products in market and people ask for more content from that product developer. They want to see Rick, our head of engineering, make barbecue for our indoor smoker. Like, it's one of the highest engagement we get. He is not a classically trained chef in Memphis barbecue, but he does make an awesome brisket.
We have some questions from the audience, and we've got some really great questions here. So let's get right into them, Andre. What types of products benefit most from a co-creation model, and which don't?
So I'll say something that we don't get a lot of credit for. I have some experience with this, the company I worked at prior. So something we haven't talked about a lot is I actually think software is a really interesting place for co-creation. There's some great work on Google design sprints. It depends on the use case, like what problem do you think you're trying to solve? And this is one I think AI can help a ton. But this is going back to before my FirstBuild days when I was in B2B. I fully prototyped a software product and greenlit it on a 5-day design sprint. And that was with having, an embedded designer to make wireframes and make them clickable. And like, you start, okay, here are the people who think they're business experts, day one. By the end of day one, we're actually with end users trying to, and so over the course of the week, Wednesday you have a prototype, Thursday you're testing again, Friday you're trying to finalize it. So software is, I think, an interesting space to do this. And honestly, I think the next frontier is honestly take this concept, and AI could be your guinea pig. Everyone's trying to push out AI and figure out how to use it in your company, and we're trying to democratize it. But like getting real groups that are already strong internally with AI alone could do it, but with some design skills, ability to make what I'll call a digital prototype, no code required necessarily. And then go sit with business users and figure out where a system or systems or process is bogging them down. Spend a week on it and see if you can re-architect it and drive a lot of throughput. That I have not seen yet. We did some things like that at my last company. So I wanted to give that idea. I said the refrigerator. For this sort of a model to be lean, if the path you're pursuing is inherently high CapEx, you're going to run into some issues that I haven't really talked about today, because then you're going to hit that investment hurdle. And so I'm generalizing that. Systems and processes underutilized, relatively simple products where you can cut and bend metal or maybe 3D print, or we've used foam and wood for, like, wouldn't it be cool if prototypes, but for physical products, anything that you can create a physical artifact to get feedback on in a low-cost way is a candidate.
What industries beyond appliances are best positioned for this type of open innovation?
I'll use this as half a plug because it was interesting. I think of the King Arthur example. And it could be companies that have a great brand, that could help, and that's someone that could do it on their own, or they could work with a FirstBuild. But companies that are maybe so think consumer product companies or CPG type companies, and it doesn't have to be just consumer. but ones that I would call kind of legacy products or brands. And they're inherently, they need to be thinking about how to reinvent themselves. So many of these types of businesses, there's sparingly few that are really so entrenched and hard to copy that they're not getting compressed in some way today, knocked off on Amazon, commoditized. And so companies like that really trying to separate themselves from the core and the brand and say, like, what are we good at? And how else might we apply that? You might take a different lens and say, what else might our brand mean to people? And flip what I said on its head. But I think those ones are really, really ripe for it. And the example I gave you earlier, like taking this sort of thinking, treating your internal business users as your crowdfund community, and enabling them with a team or a set of capabilities where they actually solve their own problems. Because all of us big companies have plenty of those problems.
Was there a product that you were really excited about, really gung-ho about, that never actually made it to market?
I'm trying to think if there's one. There was a good one, and it's one I want to revisit, especially after this example with sourdough, where we tried a different application. So there was a product called Prisma. It was before I took over as leader of FirstBuild. So like then I could think of myself as fan and community member. But it was just an awesome cold brew coffee maker. And it made real cold brew in less than 20 minutes. And if you're obsessed with coffee like I am, or I'm obsessed with being caffeinated, but that's a separate thing. Real cold brew takes a while to do well. Most of the stuff's out there is kind of, gravity based, or it's actually iced coffee and you put it in your fridge, and like, I drink black coffee. If you do, there's like a total difference in flavor profile and acidity. And I think we probably over-designed that product in hindsight, and I think we were a bit early. That's one I keep poking, that like, I don't know if we had designed quite the right product, / I think we were early for the craze. So we ended up being pricier and more solution for like a market that was about to explode. So that's one that sticks out to me, but again, that's the caffeine obsession talking.
Can you talk about your progression to revenue generation with the sourdough model? And is value generation tied back to GE expectations?
It's tied back to GE expectations in the sense that, and we've talked about, evolving this, because we're starting to have a number of products that exist. So like, should we have a revenue goal beyond, generate enough margin to pay for yourself? Like maybe that evolves. But no, we don't have a number with GE appliances today. So I'll answer two halves, just so you understand how FirstBuild's measured. FirstBuild is asked to be completely self-funded. We try and come up with a goal of like one new product concept per month, can we deliver one to market per year? And then something that evolves is we'll have some community metric. Could be subscribers to the newsletter, it could be followers. Right now we're really, really focused on rebuilding that internal community. So actually this year it's all about in-person engagement. So that's that. In terms of the model with the sourdough sidekick, I'll share what I think I can publicly. So we actually had a very successful crowdfund, and even tooling this product for scale, and we sold many, many thousands of units. It's the suggested retail is I think 179. So we crowdfunded at some levels beneath that. So in units, it was the largest crowdfund we'd ever done. So we were essentially able to cover all the tooling plus a little effort just from the crowdfund. So that's always really nice, and that's how we think about what our internal goal was. And then we had an exclusive sales period for King Arthur. We're also a licensee. You might notice their logo on the brand. So there's a few different business models here. I'll say this just because we touched on it a couple times. This is the first ever time that I would say, so when we have sent a product to GE Appliances, like the Opal Nugget Ice Maker, or if we sold it to another company, meaning FirstBuild doesn't manage its commercialization and operations anymore. We call it graduating. So, and we've had mixed success with that. this is we're going to half graduate this product. And so it's a little bit different. It's quite likely to find its way into retail later this year, sold through GE Appliance channels, but branded FirstBuild. And we've really not done that before, but all marketing and D2C is going to stay with FirstBuild. And so like this may be the brand. And that's what looks best for this product. And I told you this before is, I think the thinking of what we're going to launch, like how does that translate to GE Appliances could be limiting. I also lead the GE Appliance small appliance division. It was built entirely on Opal. I showed up, that was my first job. I was like, give me that SKU, I will build you a business. So now we have that. But this is a very unique product, and I actually want to continue to build up our ability to market and incubate a product at FirstBuild, because maybe it gets spun off a different way in the future.
Last question. What distinguishes the 7% of ideas that succeed from the 93% that fail?
Oh God, there's a few things. In the 93, there's a whole bunch. There really is. So I'll focus on the 7 really quick.
Okay.
Like, the 7% that we solve, we found a meaningful enough community that was highly engaged, and we were able to match that with an actual job to be done that was hard or difficult or impossible to do with a solution on the market today. And we were able to do that at a price for the product where people were like, yes, take my money.
Okay.
I want to be able to do that. The 93% fail, wrong community, you're not solving a big problem. We're usually talking to lots of people with interest, but sometimes very few people have this problem. There are things that that explode on social media that just have rampant voyeurism. I might love sourdough, I'm not interested in baking it. We haven't been able to make it affordable enough. We can't actually deliver the thing at a cost and a size. I told you, we've had stuff that was too expensive. It's a litany of things. It really can be a litany of things. Maybe, late in the process, we ran into a patent and like, we can't play in that space. I mean, I can think of maybe one of those. So there's a lot of reasons for a product to fail, and that's why I think our process is important.
And no success is the same.
No. I think we've learned from our successes and failures more of the changes in our go-to-market model, right? Like trying this with King Arthur, working with influencers, like not just having a community who wants to buy the product, but people that are actually credentialing the product at launch, whether that's an influencer or ingredient maker for our indoor smoker, or the mellow mushroom maker, or King Arthur who sells baking goods. Like that's now part of the secret sauce, and that came out of a product we killed and open sourced. So the failure is important because a lot of good stuff comes out of it. Sometimes it's I'll never do that again. And sometimes the only good thing that came out of this failure, like I'm going to remember that because that's a key learning.
We've got to end it there.
Yeah.
Andre, really illuminating discussion. Thank you for sharing your insights. And thank you to all of you for being here and for your great questions. We will see you online. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone.